Department of Homeland Security has launched Operation Metro Surge. The atmosphere is tense. It is militarized. And, as we're finding out from these documents we have today, it is just incredibly deadly. But here's the thing. If you look at the research we're diving into, this isn't a surprise. It's a fulfillment of a prophecy.
It really is a chilling scenario. We are looking at a cityscape that has been fundamentally altered. But you're right. The source material we are covering today argues this was all pretty much inevitable.
So let's set the stage. We are doing a deep dive into a research report titled Anti-Blackness Precedent and IC Shootings. Now, if you're listening and thinking, okay, another report on policing, I know the drill, I want you to hold on. Because this isn't just a report on what happened, it's a report on the architecture that allowed it to happen. It's about how the machinery was built.
Right. The central thesis here is it's terrifyingly logical. The document argues that the recent killings of 2 U.S. citizens, Renee Nicole Good and Alex Pretti by federal agents, are not accidents. They aren't bad apples or some kind of fog of war moment. The report argues they are the result of a system doing exactly what it was designed to do.
And the report links these deaths to a long-standing warning from the foundational Black American community, the FBA. And that warning is basically this: anti-Black policing is a laboratory.
That's the key image, a laboratory.
Yes, where the government tests out tactics, legal loopholes, and violence on a specific group. And once they perfect those tools, they don't just put them away in a drawer. They take the mass market.
Precisely. The term they use for it is spillover. The argument is, if you create a legal and tactical machine designed to crush one group without consequence, eventually that machine is going to turn its gears toward the rest of the citizenry. And that is exactly what this source claims happened in Minneapolis in early 2026.
The gears turned.
They turned toward a white suburban mom and a nurse at the VA.
So our mission today is to trace that architecture. We're going to look at how a state of exception created centuries ago has morphed into a reality where a poet in an SUV is labeled a domestic terrorist.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the catalyst. Operation Metro Surge. What was the pitch? Why were they even there?
Well, originally this was billed as an immigration enforcement agenda. The DHS said they were there to, quote, secure the interior, standard talking points. But as often happens, the mission, it crept, it morphed.
It grew. It stopped being about immigration status and started being about total compliance.
Okay, let's talk about the first case. Renee Nicole Good. Reading the details in the report, it really hits you because she sounds like anyone you'd know.
She checks every single box of what society typically considers a sympathetic victim. She's 37, she's a mother, an award-winning poet with an English degree. She had literally just dropped her 6-year-old son off at school.
So she's driving her SUV, and she sees a federal raid happening. Neighbors are being targeted, and she stops. She doesn't just drive by. She stops to support them. And that is when she encounters ICE agent Jonathan Ross.
And this is where that laboratory concept comes into play immediately. The interaction goes south just instantly. The agent, Ross, approaches her vehicle. She's partially blocking the street, sure, but he starts recording her with his phone, which is a thoroughly modern, almost taunting twist. And then, without clear provocation, he draws his weapon and fires 3 shots into the car.
Now, here is where it gets really dark. The official narrative versus the reality. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem comes out almost immediately and labels Renee Good a domestic terrorist. They said she was a radical, that she tried to run the agent over. That's the headline that ran everywhere. But then you look at the forensic evidence in this report.
The independent autopsy and forensics, they tell a completely different story. Renee was shot in the head, arm, and chest. But the trajectory analysis is damning. It shows she was shot while the vehicle was moving away from the agent.
So she wasn't using the car as a weapon at all?
No. She was trying to flee. She was scared. She was driving away from the man with the gun.
And the aftermath is just as disturbing. The report mentions that despite having agents there who knew first aid, they delayed CPR for 10 minutes. They actually blocked a physician who was on the scene from helping her while she still had a pulse.
That disregard for life, that let them bleed out mentality, that is something the report identifies as a direct spillover from anti-Black policing precedents. It's the dehumanization of the subject. Once you label them a threat, their life has no value. It doesn't matter if you're a poet or a quote-unquote suspect, you're just a body in the way.
And sadly, she wasn't the last one. Just a few weeks later, January 24th, 2026. We have Alex Jeffrey Pretti.
And Alex Pretti is another profile that usually, insulates someone from state violence. He's 37, works as an ICU nurse at the VA hospital. He's a lawful gun owner, no criminal record, and he's out there protesting the killing of Renee Good.
He's protesting the first killing, and he becomes the second victim. The DHS claimed he ambushed Border Patrol agents with a 9mm handgun.
Again, the narrative is violent aggressor, ambush, but the video evidence, which was verified by local officials, shows Alex holding a cell phone, not a gun. A cell phone. He was surrounded by 6 agents, wrestled to the ground, and beaten.
Beaten while he was on the ground.
Yes. And the shooter appeared to emerge from that scuffle with his gun already drawn and fired while Pretti was pinned to the sidewalk.
It's just terrifying. You have a nurse holding a phone, and they paint him as a gunman.
And this connects us right back to the core thesis. The analysis in the report says the state has successfully othered the Black population for so long that they have created a blueprint. They know how to take a citizen and turn them into a non-person, a thug, a terrorist.
Right.
And once that blueprint exists, it can be applied to anyone. It doesn't matter if you're a Black teenager or a white nurse. If you are dissident, you get the treatment.
So let's dig deeper into this blueprint. The report calls it the historical architecture, the laboratory. It says anti-Black racism is the primary operating code of the American system.
Yeah.
That's a pretty heavy statement.
It is, but the report backs it up with history. The FBA argument is that Black people serve as the experimental group. The government tests its most intrusive powers on them first. And to understand this, you have to go all the way back to the 1700s and the slave patrols.
The ancestors of modern policing.
Correct. The report draws a direct line from slave patrols to modern ICE and Border Patrol. Now, think about the power a slave patrol had. Their job was to hunt runaways, suppress resistance. To do that, the law gave them extraordinary power. They could enter any home, Black or white, without a warrant if they suspected a runaway was inside.
Wait, so even back then, the policing of Black bodies allowed the state to violate the privacy of white citizens too?
Exactly. That is the critical precedent. It created what the report calls a state of exception.
That sounds like some kind of legal jargon. Can you break that down for us?
Think of it like a constitution-free zone. It's a legal space where the normal rules, like the Fourth Amendment, protection against unreasonable search and seizure, they just don't apply because the goal is control. The argument is that the zone was created to control Black people, but the nature of the zone is that it suspends rights for everyone in the vicinity.
And the argument is that this state of exception never went away.
It just evolved. The report argues that just as slave patrols bypassed the Fourth Amendment to hunt slaves, modern ICE agents in 2026 use targeted operations to smash the windows of U.S. citizens without warrants. They claim they are looking for undocumented people, but that excuse lets them violate the privacy and safety of anyone they encounter.
That connects to something else the report talks about, the hands-up phenomenon. We all remember Ferguson, Michael Brown.
This is a crucial psychological component of the laboratory. The report discusses how the media and the state collaborated to demonize Michael Brown. Remember, he was unarmed, but he was described as a demon, a thug, a monster.
Even though the narrative from protesters was, hands up, don't shoot.
Right. But the point is, society accepted that narrative. We, meaning the general public, we accepted that if the state says someone is scary, the state is allowed to kill them, even if they are unarmed. And now, because that narrative logic was accepted, the state uses it on Renee Good. They called a mother in an SUV a domestic terrorist. They called a nurse with a cell phone a mass shooter, the report says. Because society accepted this demonization for Black men, the state now feels comfortable using it on white mothers. They know the public has been trained to accept the official story over the evidence.
That is, wow, it really makes you rethink how we consume news about these shootings. It's not just about the individual event, it's about the habit of how we see victims.
It's the architecture of precedent. If it works on the experimental group, it goes into production for everyone else.
So that's the psychological spillover. But the report also lists very specific tactical spillovers, the stuff they actually use on the streets. This is where the war on drugs comes in.
The war on drugs was the great accelerator. The report argues it was explicitly targeted at Black communities, but look at the tools developed for it. Take civil asset forfeiture. It started as a way to seize assets from drug kingpins to cripple their organizations, but what is it now? It's a fundraising tool.
Yeah, I've read stories about police taking cash from people just driving down the highway who haven't been charged with any crime,
Yeah.
just because they had too much cash.
That's the spillover. It went from drug dealers in FBA neighborhoods to any citizen with cash. Then you have no-knock warrants, designed for high-risk raids in the inner city now. They are used in immigration ops and general protest suppression.
And the gear, the 1033 program.
Yes, the program that sends surplus military equipment to local police. The report mentions MRAPs, those mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, rolling down the streets of Minneapolis in 2026. That gear was originally justified to fight urban crime. Now it's being used against a diverse crowd of protesters.
It seems like every time we say it's okay to use this extreme tactic because it's for those people, we're signing a permission slip for it to be used on us later.
That's the core warning. And it's not just tactics, it's the law itself. The report highlights the gutting of the Fourth Amendment through pretextual stops.
This is the broken taillight trap.
Yes. The Supreme Court allowed police to use minor traffic infractions, a broken taillight, changing lanes without signaling, as a pretext to stop a car and investigate unrelated hunches. Historically, this was used to police black drivers, driving while black.
But in 2026, Minneapolis.
In 2026, ICE uses that FBA precedent to stop any vehicle they suspect is interfering. The report says, and I'm quoting here, because the public accepted driving while black as a legitimate policing strategy, they have no legal defense against the state smashing their windows. You can't have a partial constitution. If you gut the Fourth Amendment for one group, you have gutted it for everyone.
So that brings us to the aftermath. The families of Renee Good and Alex Pretti, they want justice. They want to sue. But the report says they are in a legal cul-de-sac. Why?
2 words, qualified immunity, and a legal concept called the Bivens Doctrine.
Qualified immunity is the one we hear about all the time with police officers. It's the shield.
Right. It protects government officials from liability unless they violate clearly established rights. It has been used for decades to protect police who shoot unarmed black citizens. But in this case, the report notes that J.D. Vance, acting in a legal capacity, here cited qualified immunity to protect Agent Ross.
So the shield built to protect cops in the hood is now protecting federal agents shooting poets in the suburbs.
Exactly. But Bivens is even more specific and honestly more insidious. Bivens is supposed to be the mechanism that allows you to sue federal agents for violating your rights. But the Supreme Court has systematically narrowed it.
Narrowed it? How?
They've made it almost impossible to apply in new contexts, especially in cases involving drug enforcement context, because nobody fought to protect those rights when it was just happening to the marginalized. The legal avenue is now closed.
So the families of Good and Pretti literally cannot sue.
Effectively, yes. The door to the courthouse was locked years ago, and nobody noticed until these families tried to walk through it.
That leads to a really biting section of the report, the critique of superficial solidarity. The source is pretty harsh on non-black groups here.
It is, but it fits the logic of the argument. The report discusses co-optation. It mentions how some groups use FBA slogans like adopting the language of civil rights or even the term African American to gain social benefits, but they don't actually help dismantle the system of white supremacy.
It talks about something called benevolent racism.
Yes. Supporting policies that harm FBA communities, like increased policing or tough-on-crime laws, while claiming to support justice. The report argues that by supporting the machinery of the state when it targets black people, other groups are effectively feeding the predator.
That's a chilling image. Feeding the predator.
The argument is that the American hierarchy requires a bottom. It needs a group to be at the bottom to function. By staying silent when FBA neighborhoods were over-policed or when the legal system was being stripped away in those areas, other groups validated the tools. They signaled to the state, this is acceptable.
And now the predator is big enough to eat them.
Precisely. The report says the state is a predator. If you help it feed on the experimental group, it gains the strength to feed on you. In 2026, the silence of the past decades is coming back to haunt these families in Minneapolis.
We've gone from the slave patrols of the 1700s all the way to a frozen street in Minneapolis in 2026.
It is a long timeline, but the threat is continuous. The state of exception that was created to control enslaved people never disappeared. It just expanded. It became the war on drugs, now Operation Metro surge.
And the victims have changed. Or rather, the list of potential victims has grown.
That's the prophecy the report refers to. The warning from the FBA community was always this: the state does not need a victim to be black to execute them. It only needs them to be in the way. Renee Good was in the way, Alex Pretti was in the way, and because we spent centuries refining the tools to remove people who are in the way without consequence, there was nothing to stop it from happening to them.
So what does this all mean for us, for you listening right now?
The final takeaway from the source is provocative. It suggests that allyship isn't just about being nice or helping a marginalized group. It's about self-preservation.
Self-preservation.
Yes. If you live in a house where the foundation is built on the oppression of one group, where the laws allow the state to kill that one group without consequence, you have to ask yourself, can that house ever be safe for you? Or is the structure itself destined to collapse on everyone inside?
That is the question we are going to leave you with today. If the rights of the most vulnerable aren't secure, neither are yours. It's not just history, it's architecture, and we are all living in it.